Hey everyone, welcome to Business Unchained, where entrepreneurs and business owners come together to power up on their journey to greatness.
Bobby Mascia is the founder and CEO of Greenridge Wealth Planning. All opinions expressed by Bobby and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinion of Greenridge Wealth Planning. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any financial decisions. Clients of Greenridge Wealth Planning may maintain positions in any securities discussed in this podcast.
All right, let's get rocking, man. Episode 17. My next guest is an individual that has been in the tech industry, specifically in consumer electronics space, for over 20 years. He's worked at companies such as HTC, and if that kind of rings a bell and you can't quite place it, it was once the largest smartphone manufacturer in the world. And there he was global VP president of connected products. He was responsible for building from scratch HTC's North American national retail channel and brought in new partners such as Best Buy, Amazon, Target, and others, creating a new channel of revenue stream in billions of dollars. His business development skills with partners such as Google, Qualcomm, Under Armour, this all led him to Silicon Valley, where he became the global VP of sales for a $330 million startup, and that firm was Essential Products. Now, Essential, that was founded by Andy Rubin, which many of you may know him as the creator and the father of the Google Android operating system. And this was actually the time when he befriended our common friend who introduced us, where he ended up in California dreaming and sleeping on one of their guest room blow-up mattresses for months until he could find a place to live. He's the alumni of Stanford Graduate School of Business and now boasts two new startups as co-founder, CMO, CEO, and board director, with the third one on the way. I bring to you, with the best name in the business, my man, Wolfgang Muller, for episode 17 of Business Unchained. Dude, so happy to have you on, man. I really appreciate the time. I know you are my West Coast connection who is now in Chicago and on his way to Spain. So glad that we could catch you for a little bit. Hoping for a couple things today. I want to, you've seen successes, and I'm sure they were built on the experiences that you've encountered along the way of failure and trial and error. One thing of mention is that you believe in setting yourself up in business regarding legal and succession planning early. It's never too early is what you say. So I would love for you to share some of the advice and experiences that you had along those lines with listeners today. And then number two is F2O Sports, man. Decentralization of sports. I think it's totally fascinating. What a fun time to talk about this and what you're doing with the Euro Cup and the Copa Americana going on. We got Messi in Argentina taking on Canada tonight in my backyard. And I want to get into a little bit of this, how you built the idea, what you're doing with it, and where you see it going. So, with those two topics, what else do you want to make sure that we cover so this way we make the most of our 30, 45 minutes or so?
I think that's good. We'll dovetail from all that stuff, but I think that's right on. And yeah, I love the idea of like giving some advice from things that as a founder that I've run into. I love it, man. For future founders. That's great.
Yeah, dude. I mean, listen, this podcast really stemmed from, you know this, and I probably said it a couple of times on the podcast already, but I run an advisory firm that specializes with entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur, grew up entrepreneurial, family, peer. Just different businesses. And one of the things that I love is I love hearing the stories of people and the trials and tribulations they've gone through, the things that they've learned. I feel like I learn something new every time I talk to somebody. And I think that this is a great opportunity for other people to kind of share in that experience with me. So, how do you build a business? How do you make it self-managed so it's not owning you and your time? I've done it. I have my ways that I've tripped and fell over, but hearing everybody else's, like I said, I learn something new every day and every time I talk to somebody. So I'm looking forward to learning something new from you today. If you want to kick it off with F2O, or you want to kick it off with your experience, why don't you give us a little background? Paint us a picture of Wolfgang's rise from the bottom to the top, and then we'll kind of dovetail, like you said. From
you guys did thank you, Bobby. And yeah, thanks for having me, man. This would be fun. And I think you did a great job of kind of giving the history of what I did in my professional career. Let me start out. Here's where I'll start, because F2O Sports is where we're going to talk about, which is the fun part. I love it. And that's the things that are happening right now. But yeah, I got there. I would say everything for me was really, you mentioned that HTC part. That's kind of where I started growing up. I mean, I had jobs before. I mean, listen, right out of college, I was telling my mentor story, but I think a lot of us need to go through that. And I know you've gone through it, which is that grind it out, first job that really teaches you to be humble. That job back in the day, right out of college, was I was working for a CLEC out of college. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's basically it was when the Baby Bells got broken up. They allowed, there's deregulation, and the government allowed other companies to start reselling local and long distance services on the big Baby Bells, right? The Ameritags, SBCs of the world, et cetera. And so all these companies started popping up, money started going in there, and they would, go and resell services. So my job right out of college, I had choices. I could go into finance and work for LaSalle Bank and all this, but I was pretty poor. I'm very poor growing up. So yeah, I didn't have much money. I had a lot of student loan debt. And I had to help my parents at some point, and that's true. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I need to make money. And so I looked at, everyone's like, you got to go into sales, And so everyone's like, oh, the new thing is telecom sales and tech and all this other fun stuff. And this is right when BlackBerry was coming out. So early 2000s. BlackBerry's coming out. Everyone's getting into mobility and tech. And, there's Voice Stream at the time, became T-Mobile. And that literally happened within a month of me graduating. And I started walking up and down the street from, selling local long distance phone services. And it was one of the most humbling experiences of my life.
Oh yeah, man. Cutting your teeth in sales, there's no more humbling experience, right?
Yeah. And Bobby, I can't, people don't give enough credit. That's why when I get telemarketers calling me, I'm never mean to them, because I'm like, man, I know you're paid. I'm just like, oh God, yeah, I hear you. It's not for me right now, but maybe, or I'll give him one of my buddies' number. Why don't you call this guy?
That's kind.
I can't, man. Or even client services people, like the account managers who.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Hug them. Because I was there. I was walking up and down the street, knocking on Joe's Cleaner, holding up a sign that literally said, would you like to save 10% off your local long distance phone bill? That's
amazing.
Yeah, man. In my early 20s, it was beyond humbling. And after 3 months of that, I was like, this sucks. I don't like it. And my mentor, his name is David Jager. I mentioned a story about him earlier. He's like, listen, man, your skills are not what, yes, you can do that and you'll burn it out and you'll grind it out. He goes, but think bigger. And he's like, your job is really good when you network and you get people to trust you and build trust in you. And he's like, that's really what any type of sales is. That's what, strategic selling is. I'm like, okay. And so I got involved in all the networks I could, young executives, chamber of commerce. At one point I had 6 or 7 clubs I was part of, and I was meeting with these people every day. And eventually, you get to talk to them, you earn trust, and, you earn trust of your partners. And they're like, hey, I got a guy who needs, 30 lines and then 20 lines. And then next thing you know, I'm working on Ford Motor Company, right? Somehow through a networking connection. I'm in my early 20s, locking big deals. And I went from literally wanting to quit within 3 months to end of the year, I was, the number 2 sales rep out of 500 reps in the country.
That's unbelievable. So that mentor of yours, in terms of guiding and directing you, was that your first foray into actually having somebody,
it was,
guide you through life, or it was?
It was. My father passed away. He had cancer and he passed away. So for me, whether male or female mentor didn't really matter, but to have David kind of just guide me as a mentor, he was like a very cool older brother, but just took me under his wing. It meant a lot. And it's one of the things I try to pay forward. And one of the things I always
support.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
just
think you
having
probably
somebody there, like, right next to you to support you and kinda give you just some of those little tidbits of experiences that they've learned along the way to shorten your path, right?
yeah. I'm
I mean,
not.
we don't all find, the mentor that's gonna answer all questions as our first mentor or second or third or fourth or maybe ever, but it's the people who add the value to shorten your path and give you the guidance. I mean, that's huge, and I a lot of people don't find that.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good point. A lot of people ask me about kind of that path to success, and one of the first things I say is find yourself a mentor, and someone who's vested in you. And I'm not. I mean, you've interviewed a lot of people. I'm not sure if that comes up. Like, do they talk about mentors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are always I don't know if people quite identify a mentor in the sense of, maybe somebody who's more experienced and has been through kind of having a mentor. They may look at somebody and go, I want them to be my mentor. But more often than not, they end up be a boss or somebody in a higher position. They don't really guide or facilitate them or give them the information or the time or the energy to get them, to get them really under their wing, like you said.
Right. Yeah. Who was your
But
mentor, man? Did you have like
It's an interesting question because I didn't have a mentor until I probably about 10 years ago, I started getting into, business coaches. So
really so
I
later in life? Interesting.
Yeah, my backstory is a little bit different, and, I ended up really my drive was a chip on my shoulder to prove everybody wrong and
Right.
to prove everybody that I can do something that, I don't know why I developed that chip, but it probably had something to do with early on in my childhood, and my whole thing was I took the path of most resistance because I was gonna figure it out and do it
Yeah,
myself,
I love that.
and, you get to a certain point in business and a certain level of success where you start to look at yourself introspectively and what you can do
Yeah.
to grow and continue on this path.
Yes.
And that's one of those things that really hit me hard was I can't do this on my own. I'm not going to will myself through grit and determination. I need to have a team around me. I need to have somebody who can shorten that path for me.
Yeah,
And
at
it's
some
not all
point,
pushing
right?
through the wall. Yeah.
Obstacle is a way to, at some point, like you need probably that guidance. It sounds like for you it was 10 years ago, but
When I got into school, out of school, it was a little bit different because, as I was moving through through the corporate world, there was no one that I really looked up uh, that I gravitated to that I wanted, to be like. So
yeah,
I think that's part of a mentor also is you have to look up to them and you have to say like this, that's somebody that I admire and I want to learn something from them.
right.
And I didn't have that. That's
Yeah.
it's
That's actually a really good point. Well, and that mentor mentee evolves and through time. Like so David, to this day I still consider him a mentor and I'll reach out to him. But at one point, like we both were at it, he brought me along, right? When I got to HTC, not only was I at his level within like 2 years and he wanted that for me, like I surpassed him. Right. And so then,
Mhm.
I'm looking at him for different type of advice. And now I'm looking for someone else, another mentor, if you will, in other areas to kind of help me grow.
Right, and
And
that'll help you scale up, but that doesn't
yeah,
mean that the value that he brought in the past and the relationship that you built has to end. It's
100%.
still a sounding board, somebody that you still
100%.
trust. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I
So
have I've created one. I've had one of those that got created over the past decade.
nice.
I still call him up and we still wrap things out. And I
Exactly.
value his opinion, but I know that his opinion isn't the one that's ultimately going to give me the answer. I have my coaches that I go to and other people that I incorporate into my decision
So when
making
you
as
say
well
coach it,
sometimes.
are you doing like executive coaching, like that type of like formal or just yeah,
Yeah, I have an executive coach, and I've been through a couple of them. I think that you kind of reach a point where it may be time to move on. I still stay in touch with them, but I don't have them formally as my coach anymore. But the one that I have right now has done a lot for me, both as a person
right.
as well as in business.
That's
And I think
important too.
that's the difference that helped me
Great.
work through a lot of the things that I've dealt with over the past couple of years and scaling up the business and taking on new businesses and some of the fun that we've had.
But yeah, no, I was reading your stuff. But I mean, the reality is it goes back. I mean, that's kind of the mentor mentee. You're always, whether it's mentor mentee coach, I think, successful entrepreneurs, executives need to be looking for help. And a lot of us don't ask for help. I think that's a big thing, is we get scared of, and again, at some point you're going to hit a ceiling, right? There's only so much like, and like, making mistakes and learning from that. At some point you got to ask for help, ask questions. And what I mean help is, hey, how did you do this? Like, I'm not creating anything new. Like, Elon Musk, Tesla, it's not like Tesla didn't exist. Like, he bought, like, I mean, like, I'm not creating the internet. Like, so what are some of the things I can learn from others that have been here to help guide me? And
Well,
obviously,
there's different tools that bring you through that whole evolutionary process. The same, you can't use the same toolbox that you used early on
1,000%.
in the
Yep.
game to move and level
Yep.
up to each, whether it's
Exactly.
organizational structure or it's amount of revenue that you bring in and the types of clients that you deal with. You can't keep doing things the same and expect the results to continue. At some point, you're going to have to make a change.
Yeah. It's the definition of insanity, right? So I agree.
So
But
one of the things that that I find fascinating, and I talk to a lot of people about, is going into business and thinking about the end in mind. So even if you don't have any anticipation of selling out the business anytime soon, even if you say, listen, I want to be dead and carried out in a gurney and work my last breath in my business, you still need to have some sort of an exit strategy, because if you don't have a target and you don't understand how your business is valued and you don't understand what it is that you need to do to get from point A to B to C to D to E, then you're kind of just a rudderless ship floating in the ocean.
I agree.
And one of the things that you and I had touched upon, and I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper on, is the concept that I brought up in the beginning, was just getting yourself set up in the beginning, legally, succession
Yeah.
planning. And why don't you tell a little bit about the story of your life and how that's impacted you and why that became so important for you?
I think you hit it. As founders, especially when you do startups, and obviously being in Silicon Valley, it's everyone's got a startup, right? Everyone's excited about something, and it all starts with that idea. And sometimes we have what I call and the founders blinders on, right? Where, God, this great idea is going to be this great product, and you talk to other people, and this is where mentors come in, because you talk to other people and everyone's like a yes man. Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, I'd buy that, right? But we don't really think through the process, and maybe we think through monetization and we think about like exit, oh, I'd go IPO someday, etc. Um, but we almost think too far. And where I ran into an issue is I have founders. I had to be careful because I was always having founders blinders on, where I'm like, this can do it, and I have this energy, and we'll make this work, and this product's going to be amazing, awesome, which is a great example of that, which is the smartphone privacy hardware and software company that I helped co-found back in 2020. Founders blinders on. We're going to do this. Let's bootstrap this. Who wouldn't buy this product, etc. We still did, the market, TAM, and everything else. But my mistake on that one was I didn't set myself up for success when the time comes to actually start looking at exit, or when the time comes when something horrible happens, right? Because it always does. There's always some type of misstep. How did I set myself up for success? Or actually even just to save myself? And I didn't do it. And what I mean by that is, if you're founding a company, yes, it's great to be thinking about the exit, but what about the in-between parts? So let me give you an example. What I mean by that is, you set up a board, right? So you have a corporation, it's not an LLC, you're setting up a board, and there's all sorts of things when it comes to board governance. And do you, and most founders probably don't, do we have an understanding of what that means? Like, what is your voting structure like as a board director? You have to have more than just, an even number, you need an odd number of board members. If in fact you guys don't agree on something, which could happen, especially when you're friends, which could happen, what power do you as an individual have, right, to ensure that your voice is heard, your percentage of ownership is heard, et cetera? Preferred stockholders versus the common shareholders, when things go to votes. setting yourself, I mean, do you have a veto right? So if there's something you adamantly don't agree with from, say, a budget perspective, do you yourself have veto rights to actually say, even though I only own 20% of the company, I want to have the ability to veto this, et cetera. So setting yourself up, because I promise you, in the event that you don't agree with everyone, in the event that there is something that could hurt the company that you want to move in a different path from, you'll be stuck there you'll be stuck there going, I can't do anything.
That translates even from a corporate structure to just the basic partnership of
Agreed.
having a shareholders agreement. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, everything is great while it's great. And all it takes is one thing for the souring of a partnership. And if you don't have rules and guidelines in place, and that's the same thing for a board in terms of how do you make decisions? How do you vote on particular matters? And when you come
Yes.
to an impasse, how do you deal with
Yes.
those impasses? How do you spend money? How do you everything? How do you hire? You have to have rules of engagement and who's going to be in control of those things. And
Exactly. Exactly.
otherwise, it's mayhem.
That's the part that gets missed is it's not the sexy fun part. And sometimes we start these things with friends, right? Your classmates, and oh man, we're gonna do great. Oh, the
It's gonna be
world is
so
on
much
fire.
fun. It's gonna be just like the old days. We're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
like when we were, pulling all nighters and it's gonna be fantastic. Let's do it.
But I promise you, things will happen, whether you like it or not, that will test your resolve and test that partnership, relationship, friendship, whatever.
Now,
Um,
did you have that happen to you?
I did. And the advice I would give others would be not just set up your board, but take it a step even further back. Do your due diligence. Like, yeah, you guys could be friends for the last 10 years, but have you ever worked with that person? So, Bobby, you and I are friends for 10 years, but I'd never worked with you, or even Jason, say, one of our mutual friends. I'd be like, it doesn't hurt to be like, hey man, love you, brother, but do you mind if I talk to a few of like people you used to work with, just so I can understand like how this dynamic would work? That simple. Like, and you're going to hear from people that, and tell them to be honest, you want to get an understanding of who this person is you're about to like sign co-founder, slash founders together with. Um,
Well,
Even
that
if you
goes
think you're
huge with even identifying roles and responsibilities and who's accountable for
100%,
what. Because
100.
if you kind of just go in like the Three Musketeers and it's all for one, one for all, you're going to find that there's going to be an imbalance in the effort, or at least the perception of imbalance, if
Yeah.
those accountability metrics and marks aren't clearly identified and communicated.
And it is a tough pill to swallow and from my experience doing that and then setting myself up for failure in some ways where, I'm sitting back at like the kids table, right, listening because I didn't set up enough things to implement early on so that I would have those voices that I need to have. And it's a tough pill, especially from a type A personality. It's a tough pill to swallow when, shit hits the fan and there's legally, you're kind of limited as to what you can and can't do.
Let's say we have somebody listening on right now and they're saying, you know what, you're striking a chord with me.
Yeah.
And right now, what is the first thing that I need to do to make sure that I have these things in place? What would you say to them?
I would say then, listen, if you're just getting started and you and another, this is more of a co-founder, right? I mean, technically, even if you set up a corporation, the second you start taking people's money, you're a corp. It's no longer a sole proprietorship, right? You're now, in a corp, and you've got to be diligent and you have responsibilities. But if you're going to be a co-founder of an organization or of a new startup with someone, my suggestion would be like, settle down, take 10 minutes, just stop everything for a minute. I know you guys have visions as to what the future looks like, which is fantastic, but you need to ensure that things are set up now so that when shit hits the fan, which it will, when tension happens between the two of you or three of you, whatever, which it will, that everyone feels comfortable, including yourself, my mentee, with what that outcome will look like and what voice you have in that outcome. Legally, as well as just at a board level. And so I would say take a step back. Did you do your due diligence on your co-founders? Oh yeah, I used to work with them. It's fine. yeah, it's one thing. How long did you work with them for? Like, how well do you know these individuals? Did you work directly with them, for them? Right? Ask other people. Like I would say, do your due diligence, and that's okay to do that. And then secondly, I would say, talk to an attorney. Get yourself an attorney. Make sure you're looking at board consent documents. Make sure you're looking at, the board structure and org structure documents. Make sure that you feel comfortable with them. And more importantly, if you're a minority when it comes to the ownership, make sure you have a little something in there, like a little like, hey, I want to veto power with this, or hey, since I'm in charge of, I don't know, marketing, or I'm in charge, all budgetary items for marketing must get approved by me no matter what, right?
Well, and you can't be afraid to voice those things at
You
the
can't.
beginning, because that's your opportunity to voice them. And it's funny because we do a lot of advisory board stuff,
Yeah,
and the advisory board is really the precursor to, for
100%.
most people, because most people want to think things through before they start stroking checks. But we have a corporate attorney that said to us once, he says, "Listen, you can either pay me now or you can pay me more later." That was his motto. Pay me
Yeah,
now or pay me more later, because when you
right.
go to litigation, that shit's going to cost a lot of money. But just to put together some documents and have some conversations, it's kind of cheap in the grand scheme of things. Even though it feels like it might be a little expensive, protecting yourself and getting those things in place sit
E-
at the top.
Exactly. And some of us, I feel like, especially new founders, are like, oh man, you don't think about that. You don't. You're like, this is to your point. We're all gonna be hanging out, talking. This is fun. Like when money gets involved and big money gets involved, things change. People change. I've learned that, and you
And
have
big
to.
money's relative, right? It's,
It's
to some big money's in the hundreds of millions, to other big money is in the hundreds of thousands. It really.
exactly. I agree 100%. But you never want to be. Just set yourself up early on. Is what the moral of this is, and I
So
learned that the hard way.
so you're going on your third startup
Yeah.
that you're currently working on now. And one of the ones that I really want to focus on is F2O Sports. That is just, that is something that really I think it's fascinating. I
Thanks.
mean, decentralization of sports.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how you got to that idea and what you've kind of gone through to get, to get this thing up and running. Yeah, baby, rocking the T-shirt too. I love it. Where's my gear?
I got it. Listen, we have plenty of swag. I'll send it to the crew.
We had to do some swag swap.
Yeah,
Say
man.
that 5 times
I
fast.
want some swag.
I don't even drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee, man. I don't do caffeine.
So F2O Sports, baby. Let's go. Let's
Okay,
rock and
yeah.
roll. This is really cool.
F2O Sports, it stands for fan to owner. And if you look at our little branding here, this is a little digitalization pixel in the
Uh-huh.
O, which kind of is a nod to one of our pillars, which is called digitalization. So let me just give you the crux of it. So F2O Sports, what we are doing, and you mentioned it, is really there's 3 pillars: decentralization, digitalization, and globalization. Those are the 3. Basically, how this all thing came about was there's currently 5 founders. We're moving down to 3. The other 2, it's only because the other 2 are personal things. One of them had just had 2 kids and can't put in the time, et cetera. But what happened was it was a group of us that were at Stanford together back in 2021 in the grad
Did you do
school.
your due diligence?
We did our due diligence.
All
I
right,
did my
good.
due diligence. Trust me, this time around, I'm like, and it's been beautiful. Oh, it's so great. I did my due diligence on these boys. Anyways, bottom, I mentioned there's 2 other real the big founders. Stefano Angeli, who is his own entrepreneur. He started up fintech neobank Reba in Argentina. He's doing Utopia fintech right now. Has his own thing going. You have Michael Wright, who is on the board for AMG Bank, which is a big private bank in Colorado. Another one of my Stanford buddies, and he used to play professional soccer. And then you have myself, right? Serial entrepreneur, did awesome, was part of Essential, Stanford boy. Long story short, Mike and Stefano were working on this project together, and Mike and Stefano were like, hey, we should go buy a team. And these numbskulls were like, let's go to Costa Rica. Mike does a lot of charity work in Costa Rica where he builds houses for poverty-stricken families, and it's beautiful work. Definitely should put a plug in there and send something out to your people. But
I love
does
it.
amazing things there.
I love Costa Rica. I just got back from there. We went for spring break. It's fantastic.
I was just there. I was at Mike's. Yeah, I was just there. And
Jess was just there too with her family.
freaking
Getting
amazing.
attacked by monkeys. It's phenomenal. It's such a great place.
Isn't that like a thing? Like everyone in the US just heads there. I feel like that's the spot right
Yeah.
now. Anyways, well, so they go to buy, they're like, Mike's like, I got this team. And Mike's our elder statesman, right? And he's like, let's go. And so him and Stefano go. And it's basically like the team is like, I don't know. It's basically like one step up from maybe like a playground field.
I'm thinking of like The Air up there. Remember that movie with Kevin Bacon?
Dude, I saw pictures of this thing. I'm like, what were you gonna buy it for? But it was more like the locals loved Mike because
kind of like the Guyanese soccer team that we were talking about earlier. I mean, it's you start from that's where you sometimes have to start.
Don't bash it all because it is what it is. But and Mike, they love Mike in that local area because he builds all these homes and comes and does all this charity work. So they offered him his team, and Stefano was like, I don't think this is for us, man. We got to do something different. And then they're like, we got to think bigger, right? Of course, we have this Stanford mindset, change the world, right? Change lives, change the world. And so they're like, let's go buy MLS teams and all this other stuff. Well, you need money and capital investment for that. So they're like, how can we do this? They thought of different ways, tokenization, et cetera. But then then they came to me. They're like, hey, Wolf, this is our idea. We need someone to kind of lead the charge. We need some brand marketing around it. And, we wanted to get your idea. And I'm like, well, listen, man, anyone can go buy a team. But where I get pissed off, and this is what I brought into it, I'm a Chicago Bears fan. I don't live in Chicago anymore. I live in the Silicon Valley, but I was always a Chicago Bears fan. And I refused to watch the Bears for the last 10 years.
So hard. I'm a Giant fan. It's been difficult.
And the whole thing I go back to is this. The McCaskies who own the Chicago Bears, right? The family who owns them. They continue to raise ticket prices even when they suck. Right?
The Jets are doing the same thing.
They're begging for a new stadium of taxpayer dollars, right? And me as a fan sits here and goes, this is crap, man. Like I give them tens of thousands of dollars over the course of my lifetime. My passion, when the Bears would do horrible, for 2 days, I would just be pissed. I'd be like, everyone would be like, yeah, it's still, happy Wolf. After a call, I'd be like, God, I can't believe, and you get pissed. Green Bay's beating us every day, every freaking Sunday. I'm like, I'm done. And I had no voice. And so my whole thing was like, guys, where this lies is we need to decentralize sports. And some of this came out from conversations around tokenization, which we didn't end up doing. But we're like, why can't the fans be the owners? Why can't fans have a say in their team?
We do it with big corporations, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you start looking at, there are shareholders. So of the top 50 clubs in the world, the Green Bay Packers, Dallas Cowboys, the Real Madrids, the, top 50 sports franchises in the world, which there's a few and by the way, most of those are here in the US, but there's a few MLB teams like New York Yankees, et cetera. But most of those are NFL teams and the big football soccer league teams. And of that, there's only a fraction of them, less than 5%. I could be wrong there. I got to go look at that Forbes thing, but are actual shareholders, meaning you can buy. Green Bay Packers in the NFL are a great example. They have shareholders where you can actually buy shares into the team and have ownership in how well the Green Bay Packers do. However, what you don't get is you don't get voting rights. You get to vote who represents you on the board, but you don't even have basic voting rights like stadium renovations or and this is the thing that used to piss me off is why did we just go after you're seeing my passion right now. Why did we just, draft this quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, when we passed up on freaking Patrick Mahomes, right? And as a fan, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't do anything. You have to grin it, bear it. And then for the next 10 years, you're like, this sucks. So our whole thing was we need to give some of that back to the fans. And we want to do it for all of sports, not just soccer and football. So we came up with this idea of decentralization, digitalization, and globalization.
I think it sounds awesome, right? I mean, it almost holds decision makers to a different level of accountability, knowing that the value of their stock or their shares that could be trading on a more frequent basis is going to go up or down based upon the decisions. And people will get their cords cut or shortened a lot faster when it's less about maybe nepotism or emotion, when
100%.
it's more about business and the masses. How do you see this whole thing playing out?
So what we did was we went down a couple different paths. We raised some money to begin with. We bootstrapped a lot, and then we raised some money. I mean, none of us are taking a paycheck. We're all doing this for free right now. And we kicked it off. We looked at a couple different ways. How do you decentralize? How do we give people ownership and allow them to vote? Tokenization and blockchain was the first thing that came to mind. It's easy to trace, it's security, et cetera. But obviously, there's concerns with that here in the US. SEC, it hasn't been really regulated the way we want it to be. So we walked away from that. So then we started looking at Reg CF, right? A crowdfunding raise, and the ability to actually give people ownership in the company through a Reg CF, eventually a Reg A, et cetera. So now you actually own a unit of the actual SPV or the team itself. And this is where it starts, the decentralization. Now I own a unit, and you can own multiple units based on what you buy. Then those units actually translate into votes. This is where the digitalization comes in. Digitalization, we actually created a dashboard, and we're working on some of this. And there's some gamification in there as well. But on this dashboard, you're able to vote on different things. And depending on how many units you have, which gives you different tiers of membership, if you will, you're able to do certain things. You can vote on things like stadium localization, stadium renovations, et cetera. Operational teams. So think of like voting on who is your social media manager, right? So we'll put up like 3 candidates, here's all the things and what they've done, have a little bio, have a little video of each of them speaking, and then you get to vote on which one we're going to hire and move forward with under contract for 2 years. And at a player and at the field level, same thing goes for coaching and even players. Now, where it gets really interesting and what we're trying to gamify even further is a theory of in-match, right? When the actual game is going on, voting on things like that. So who gets to kick
Like
a corner
plays?
kick?
Oh, really? Oh man, that's
That changes everything. Now, we've had a lot of excitement from some investors because this gamification actually, brings in this element of actual in-time monetization, in-game monetization while the game is going. So we have 3 individuals that, there's a corner kick happening, right? And there's 3 individuals that we actually put up there, and they vote on, hey, they've already voted to say, we want player X to take the corner kick, the next corner kick. And then the coach, right? That gets relayed to the coach. That's who's taking the corner kick. Now, it's very aggressive. We know that there's going to be some ebbs and flows. We know that, there'll be some managers or coaches that say, yeah, I'm not going to be into that. There's going to be some players that say, hey, this isn't for me. It's too much. But we also know that if we do this right, this can kind of change sports as a whole.
Now, have you ever thought about this evolving to maybe having delegates that are people who are trying to foster votes, or how does that look when it turns into people who are looking for a more powerful say?
I love that. I love the term delegates. Ours was, yes, we'd have like lobbyists basically. You basically,
well, dude, it's an election year. I mean, how could you not think about what's going on?
I'm with you. But yeah, agreed. And there's going to be forums and groups that will be established to say, basically like team player X versus team player Y and things of that nature. There's a lot to this, and I mean, we could.
Well, where do you see? Let's say you close your eyes, right? And I don't even know what a reasonable time frame for something like this would be. But let's say we're 24, 36 months out. Where are you ideally in the space? Where have you guys kind of grown to? What's your exposure? How have you changed the game of sports?
So before I do that, I'll give you kind of the vision, because you always have to. Our goal is not just, so right now we're focusing on football, soccer.
Yep.
And we're focusing on Spain. And I can go into the reasons why, but we're focusing on Spain. Primarily because there's so many different divisions, so many different teams. Everyone's always sailing. And by the way, we spent a summer over there, and it's a disaster. Like you, Bobby, if you went with me, and you should come join me to visit some of these clubs and see how they're run. It's unbelievable. Like as a capitalist, as an entrepreneur, such as yourself, your eyes would just open up and be like, oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity, because these clubs are run with this old mentality, like this very old world mentality. And it really hasn't changed much. They haven't brought into this, like, I would say, westernized method of monetization. Like, how do you monetize the state? There's one club we looked at that literally had a 12,000 person stadium, and they only used the stadium 19 days out of the month or out of the year. And then the rest of the year wasn't used.
This is something that if you kind of take away, if you're sitting in the US right now and you're a fan of US sports, you kind of just take away your knowledge of what sports is today and rewind the clock back, I would probably say 45, 50 years. Is that fair?
Easily.
And that's what Spain looks like.
A lot of the clubs, like the big clubs, the La Liga level ones, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, I mean, those guys are monsters, right? Those La Liga, but everything in what's called Division 3, which is the ref division, down to 6 is like, and even some of the level 2 in La Liga, Segunda, unbelievable. Like, you'd be shocked. And they have relegation. So the fun part is they can go down and go up, right? Depending on how well they do each year. At the end of the year, they could go down, and then you're screwed into the lower level or up. The key is, here's what their business model has always been. God, we're going off topic. Sorry, man. Their business model has always been get into level 1 and level 2, because that's where you get the royalties from TV. Oh, that's where the big bucks are, TV royalties. That's it. That's been their mentality. But the reality is, we found when we actually started doing the research and visiting these clubs, you can stay in level 3 and level 4 and be as profitable, if not more profitable, than the level 2 and level 1s, because you're monetizing what you have. Like, give me a break. That stadium's a great example. You're not going to do a concert. You have 250,000 people population in this city. You're using this massive stadium 19 days out of the year. Let's bring in some sponsorships. Let's blow this thing out. Let's create different experiences around the stadium.
So you say we're going off topic, but I think this is kind of the meat and potatoes of how you guys, kind of envision making money and creating something out of F2O Sports that maybe people who are, because I got to admit, like, when I started watching, I'm like, this is a really cool concept. And then I'm like, how the hell do you get that to, like, there's no way the Dallas Cowboys or the Kansas City Chiefs are gonna fall into something. But now you go into this scenario of Spain level 3, and it's changing my mentality of the opportunity that's there, and it's actually pretty exciting. I think that's awesome.
It's huge. And now throw in decentralization of sports ownership. So the fan to owners, that's what we call them now, fan to owners get to vote on that. So we're like, listen, just bought this team for, let's just say we buy a team. And by the way, you can buy like teams for 200,000 euros, 400,000 euros with stadiums in like different parts of the country. So we go buy a team, and now you as a fan, we have sponsorships. We're bringing in sponsors. Which ones do you want? Get to vote. And here's, you're voting like you would as an owner, and have a decision and a voice like you would as an owner. And I think that's kind of that decentralization. But anyways, there's so much opportunity, and we don't believe it's just with soccer / football. We're taking that because it's the most popular, most watched entertainment in the world. But we're also looking at rugby. There's Formula One. Hell, pickleball is starting to pick up. There's all sorts of like these, I would say, tier 2 sports that we can decentralize. And then the goal is, within 3 to 5 years, that we actually go after one of the big boys. And I think in the 5 to 8 year span, it would be, we come back to the US and we buy an NBA team or MLB team or something.
I think to me that I'm a sports guy. I'm probably not like the typical sports guy. I can't spew off statistics and I don't know everything, that's going on across board. But to me, to think about the idea of having more than just I love this team, or I like this team, but really a vested interest, that kind of gets me, that's what gets me more excited.
Right? Okay, I'm gonna give you one story, and I know we're time-wise, we'll be careful here, but I told this story. We did a documentary and I told this story, but so where it hit for me, because I was kind of in your boat, when Mike and Stefano approached me, I'm like, I love you guys, but I'm doing my due diligence. And in my head, I'm like, do I have my founder's blinders on? Because like, I'm too passionate. But I'm in DC visiting family. What was it? 2021, 2022, 2022, Christmas is 2022. And we get into an Uber, and I have to sit up front because everyone's like, we're all packed in there. The lady driving the Uber next to me, amazing. Older woman, covered in head to toe with Washington Redskins / Commanders gear because it's cold out. Commanders, Redskins, and she's just like covered. She's like, yeah, driving us. And of course, my family knew. I'm like, I got to ask her. I'm like, listen, so you're like a Redskins fan? She's like, oh yeah, I lived by the stadium my whole life, grew up as a kid near the stadium, do or die. She starts talking about the quarterback and all this other stuff. And I started asking her, I'm like, yeah, you die hard. And she's like, yeah, that's why I drive Uber. It's my second job to pay for my season tickets. And
That's amazing.
Right there, I'm like, this lady is taking in a second job to pay for the team she loves. So she's giving her hard-earned money. And my mind immediately goes to the owner at the time, which was Dan Schneider, right? Who has been in the news for like everything from, you just go look him up, right? Horrible things, horrible.
Oh, yeah.
The Redskins haven't been playoff worthy at that time. Like they haven't been anything in the last 20 years, right? And this woman is a diehard. She's like, I also go to see 2, away games. And I start asking, and she's like, I take notes. I'm like, what do you take notes of? She's like, of the stadiums. And I'm like, what is that? Why? She's like, well, eventually we'll get a new stadium and I won't have a say in it, but it'd be cool if we did these fun things like Allegiant Stadium does. And my head was like, this is it. Like this is.
Well, I mean, this woman, you could even draw the comparison of what Uber did to the medallion system for the taxi services. I mean, that's kind of like what you would almost be doing for sports in some regard or the next.
Yeah, it's like a gig economy. But when that was it, and I remember texting my boys, going like, guys, like we got to do this at some level. We got to do this. We got to try at least. And so that was kind of my story. And man. Yeah, man.
Well, I love the idea of the founder's blinders. How did you go from a poor kid in Chicago to Stanford and a serial entrepreneur? I gotta fill that gap before we get out of here. And I know your time is valuable, so I don't want to, be greedy with it, but I got to have that answer before we get.
I think you have a choice, and this is getting a little personal, but when you have a choice when you're doubting out, and I think talking to others like Stefano and others from Argentina, stuff like that, it's made me feel better, about this country. We live in a really good country, right? The US is a great country. I've traveled all over the world, and sometimes we poo-poo it, whether you're right, left, it doesn't matter. But, and there's a lot of things that are wrong. But at the end of the day, hard work, education, things of this nature, if you focus on that here in the US, opportunities will arise, right? Opportunities will open up for you. And I was blessed at a young age, even though we were pretty poor. My mom, dad, sick, cancer, lupus. But my mom specifically was someone who really pushed me to always, be the best version of myself, regardless, right? Regardless if I didn't have the car that everyone else had, or regardless if I had to walk to school.
My mom was the same way. You got a good mom. Love that.
Oh, she's an amazing woman. She was amazing. And so that always pushed me, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. And like, I never felt like I was less than anyone else because I was poor. I mean, and I did some pretty bad, at times, I'll be honest with you, I had to this is horrible. And I hate saying this, I got to go find the store, but I remember I had to literally steal clothing sometimes just so I could have clothes to wear to school, because I was embarrassed because I was going to be wearing the same clothes I had from the year before. Right. And it was a bad situation. But my mom would always say, keep your head up, work hard, and things will happen. So I threw myself into sports, where I learned a lot of camaraderie and leadership. Then I threw myself into organizations, president of the student body, working in different clubs. My whole mentality was to be at school as long as I could, doing whatever I could. I didn't come home till 7:00 at night most nights, walking home, because I was in clubs or working on something, setting up the next dance, or whatever. And I learned a lot of everything from rules of parliamentary procedure to, at a young age, to organization, delegating, having people work on this, what does a treasurer actually do? What's our budget? Things of that nature. And that's kind of where it all started for me. And I just never looked back. My mom gave me the mentality of, it doesn't matter how where you came from. In this country, it matters, how hard you work and what you make for yourself as you get older. And that's it, man. That's literally it. And then I just never looked back, whether it was, McLeod USA, finding mentors, whether it was, HTC and like learning everything I needed to learn to become an executive. And then moving into the entrepreneur, like startup world, I always took that mentality. And the reality is we live in a great country. It's all there. You just got to work hard for it.
Well, I don't think there's any better parting advice than what you just said there. And I really appreciate the time. I really appreciate you and coming on to, to spend some time with us. Where can people find you if they're looking to find more about you, F2O Sports? Where do we go? And we'll have these in the notes as well.
Yeah. Head on over to f2osports.com. Take a look at us.
Great video on the homepage.
Yeah. We did a documentary. That was a great, fun experience last year. So please head on over there. And yeah, feel free to email me. I give this email out. So it's wolfgang@f2osports.com. I look at my email regularly. Happy to hear from people. And yeah, that's it, man. If you want to find us, come check us out.
All right. Well, listen, episode 17, that's a wrap. Thank you so much.
Hey, Bobby.
Appreciate you, man.